Hello there, and thank you for tuning in. I am First Alert Meteorologist Cutter Martin here with a check of the First Alert forecast, and certainly we do have weather to talk about this work week. This go around, though, the weather setup kind of in favor of a less impactful scenario for North Georgia. Nicer weather overall for Atlanta, for Marietta, Alpharetta, down to Eatonton, up to Rome, and over to Clayton, Georgia. Everyone kind of avoiding what is forecast to be a pretty severe major impact from what is forecast to become Major Hurricane Milton to the state of Florida, far south Georgia, coastal Georgia. Still some question marks. How far north does that kind of shield of rain and wind get, but still the worst of it likely to remain to the south. So a lot to talk about here. Going to kind of step slowly into the forecast. We'll talk about what's happening this afternoon, what we have right now, what we're forecasting over the next several hours before we get into the nitty-gritty of the work week, which kind of includes that interesting weather scenario. I want to remind you that we are streaming across many platforms right now on Atlanta News First Plus. That's on Roku, Amazon Fire, the Atlanta News First app, First Alert Weather app. Two places we can chat, though. Streaming on Atlanta News First YouTube account. Again, just search Atlanta News First and the YouTube bar. Give us a like and a follow, and you'll be alerted to breaking news streams, First Alert Weather streams, ANF Plus kind of streams and conversations just like this one. Also, we are streaming, many platforms, but you can text us separately, 470-777 WANF. Again, that is 470-777-9263. You can go ahead and through the course of this particular ANF Plus stream, you can go ahead and shoot us a text. Again, taking you outside in a sense here. This is First Alert Radar. Temperatures overlaid on the map. We all know it's nice outside, but it definitely is warmer than it should be this time of year. Good afternoon to you, Michael Baxter, saying greetings to everyone at Atlanta News First. Greetings right back to you. Hopefully your day is going well. Your weekend has been great. And again, Michael, if you have any weather questions, Michael's on YouTube, Atlanta News First. Just holler in the little comment thread. I have the live chat up, so I should get those updated questions, comments. And if there are any concerns, again, pretty quickly, if I do miss them, you can always reach out to me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, X, Threads, any place that you can chat, not just myself, the entire First Alert Weather team. We are there to answer those questions. So nice outside right now. Next several hours, weather is shaping up very nicely, more of the same. I think we pretty much already reached our high temperature for the day in the mid-80s. As of about 30 minutes ago, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was 84 degrees, much the same right now, and it's going to be a pretty warm evening, a mild evening after sunset. Again, temperatures do, of course, trend cooler, but it is still going to be a fairly mild evening with temperatures through the course of, the dinner plans, just after dinner plans, in the 70s. Should more often than not be in the 60s by that time of evening this time of year. So we are far normal than we should be, kind of in a very warm weather setup across the area. Hello to a new viewer on YouTube. Atlanta News First is commenting. Hello to you. Thanks for tuning in and for watching. And again, next several hours looking good. Let's go ahead and bring you up to speed on what Milton is doing. Again, well to the south of North Georgia, not in any way, shape, or form going to impact North Georgia here anytime too soon. Though I think, indirect impacts. We will have some clouds streaming back into North Georgia. Tropical Storm Milton right now, though, doing much more than producing cloud cover. We have 80-mile-an-hour sustained winds. Again, kind of in a no man's land, so to speak, as it goes to as it comes to radar. You can see some of those showers wrapping around into the northeastern Mexican coastline back to about Monterrey, Mexico, the lower Texas coastline, South Padre Island, lower Rio Grande Valley region, some rain showers. But the bulk of the rain, it looks like there isn't any out there. However, we are certainly, there is rain out there. There is wind out there, sustained winds at 80 miles an hour. But radars just can't see that far into that corner, that southwestern corner, the Bay of Campeche, that portion of the Gulf of Mexico. And at the same time, may not be able to see rain that is undoubtedly, we're sure it's spinning around out here, but we kind of have an interesting setup where we have a huge blob of tropical moisture. Within that, we do have built in. We also have another area of low pressure closer to the Florida Peninsula. Lots of tropical moisture absolutely being squeezed out, rained out over the Florida Peninsula. And this is days ahead of the direct impacts from Milton. Milton may be contributing some moisture to that, But it's not just Milton that's producing the widespread and at times heavy rain across Florida. It's raining right now from, even almost Savannah, Georgia, down to Jacksonville, Perry, Florida area that was so heavily impacted by Helene just more than a week ago. They're dealing with steady rain. Tampa, St. Pete dealing with steady, at times heavy rain. Fort Myers, Naples, Orlando, Melbourne, Cape Canaveral, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, the entire peninsula except for maybe Destin, Panama City Beach, westward, Fort Walton Beach, and Pensacola, dealing with widespread and at times pretty heavy rain there at the moment. And this is all ahead of the direct impact from Milton. Derek's saying they need to start naming hurricanes. Not sure what you mean by that. We run out of names, and there actually have been some of those names, Derek, that you mentioned. Not Butch, not Spike, but some of those names have made it onto the list. And, of course, when a hurricane produces or even a tropical storm produces significant impacts, damage figures skyrocket, deaths and injuries, widespread destruction, they retire the name and they replace it with a name starting with the same letter that was just retired. Case in point, they retired Matthew, they retired Michael, and now we have Milton as the M, and, hopefully don't have to retire Milton. But this is forecast to become a very dangerous hurricane, major hurricane there in the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, do have the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. Time now is 4:37. And we will have the new update here shortly. Doesn't appear to be in just yet. Yeah, that's from the 2 p.m. Eastern Time advisory, but it's 4:37. Yesterday, they got us that new advisory in, the 5 p.m. Eastern advisory, that new track, new stats on the storm in a little early. In fact, while we were streaming on Atlanta News First Plus, yesterday, this time 24 hours ago, we got that 5 p.m. update. So we're going to sit on this for a minute. We may get it in through the course of this stream. I don't anticipate too many changes. However, I think if there is a change, they could very well increase intensity, not necessarily at landfall in the forecast, but over the next 48 hours. So between now and Tuesday, 8 p.m. or so, you may see that forecast intensity come up just a bit, as several forecast models are showing some rapid intensification, and we already have seen a pretty quick ramp up in intensification of Milton in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, the Bay of Campeche, well south and west of the state of Georgia, well south and west of metro Atlanta. And the reason why this is forecast to have more of a, easterly, a little bit more northeasterly, and then back to easterly heading is because, we're very lucky here in the city of Atlanta and North Georgia. We're somewhat protected. A front is going to move well south of Atlanta, maybe stalling out across South Georgia, portions of the Gulf Coast, I-10 corridor, lower Texas coastline. And behind that front, we're tracking, cooler air, drier conditions, and really pleasant weather, coolest weather in months, filtering into North Georgia and metro Atlanta. That same front, though, more or less acting like a highway, allowing Milton to kind of skirt up along and just ahead of it into the Florida Peninsula. And we've seen the kind of uncertainty begin to shrink over the past 24, 36 hours as, looking back in history and just statistically, the margin of error gets less and less and less as we get closer and closer and closer to that landfall time. In this scenario, looking like Wednesday, maybe midday, perhaps late afternoon into evening, forecast to be a Category 3 Wednesday morning, 8 a.m. Still a bit of a ways away from landfall, and don't want to get too specific here. We're still waiting for the atmosphere to evolve, all the pieces to the puzzle to be in place before Milton arrives to really know exactly where this is going, that precise landfall point and in what state it'll be in when it gets there. But there are some signs that the peak intensity, whatever that may be with this hurricane, major hurricane, could be off the coast of Florida. With any luck, we'll see a little bit of weakening as it approaches that western coastline, maybe Florida's Nature Coast, perhaps down to Tampa, St. Pete, even as far south as Fort Myers, Naples area, still in that cone of uncertainty. The core of the system could go anywhere within that cone, and statistically there are scenarios where it has gone just outside of that original cone, but more often than not in the cone for that landfall point. And we know impacts will extend well beyond that, especially on the northern side of this particular system. The structure of the system will change as it approaches Florida. In fact, I have a forecast model here. Again, just one run of one forecast model, but it kind of speaks to what many are telling us, and that is that this is going to encounter a little bit more wind shear and a little bit more dry air as it approaches Florida's western coastline. Keep in mind, though, it doesn't mean it's anything to write off. This is still going to be a powerful system, still going to bring severe impacts to the state of Florida, regardless of what category it is, what shape it is in, exactly, at that landfall point. Case in point, the scenario is already pretty messy for the state of Florida. Lots of moisture out ahead of it. Of course, we see Michael starting to spin away, and I can go ahead and close this so that we can draw on it, and I can more, hopefully more visually explain a bit more successfully what is forecast to happen. And you can see here Michael spinning away just off the Yucatan Peninsula, likely by that point tomorrow morning, a solid hurricane, maybe Cat 2, getting close to major hurricane status potentially tomorrow, especially afternoon and evening. Now watch what happens as we go through time here. System kind of wraps up, maybe reaches its peak intensity as we get into Tuesday. That tight, relatively small as the size, as the core of the system goes. It's rather small, which actually supports a stronger storm. It's much more easy for a smaller hurricane in size to ramp up its wind speed than a larger hurricane. We saw that kind of similar setup and some of those scenarios play out with Major Hurricane Helene, making landfall again in Florida, unfortunately, just more than a week ago. Here we are Tuesday. Watch what happens as we get into landfall point, though. There's, of course, rain on the south side of the system, and we're going to go and put another pause point in here so we can talk about the setup, why the structure will change. As it encounters that wind shear and some of that dry air, this is the center. As I draw the arrows, that's the center of the storm as forecast by this one run of this one forecast model. Notice where all the rain is, all those greens, those yellows, those oranges, those reds, kind of on the northern half of this system. So it's very possible that the bulk of the really nasty weather is going to be on the northern half of this system. Of course, not completely dry to the south. We have a feeder band, showers and thunderstorms, tornado potential over the Bahamas, South Florida preceding landfall, and even Southwest Florida. Now, I'm not saying conditions are going to be good, but I do think the heaviest rain potential, the greatest risk for inland flooding, and perhaps some of the strongest winds likely to be near and north of wherever the center of circulation comes onto land, makes landfall along the west coast of Florida. And folks, of course, on YouTube concerned about loved ones, friends in Florida and the setup. Now, what I will say is that hoping we can get some weakening before this makes landfall, but I do think over the next 24, 48 hours now through Tuesday evening, we're going to see a very quick ramp up in intensity, perhaps even beyond Category 3 status. Now, here in North Georgia, front is to our south. By the time we get to Wednesday, Thursday, this system probably will throw some clouds our way, especially south of Atlanta, especially east of Atlanta, maybe Eatonton, for example. Could be dealing with a lot of clouds. But we're kind of firmly entrenched in a cooler, the drier condition, and that front well to our south kind of guiding the system, keeping the system to the south of Atlanta and to the south of North Georgia. If you live in far south Georgia, Tifton, Valdosta, Waycross, Brunswick, coastal Georgia up to Savannah, you need to keep an eye on the system, not for direct impacts, the core of the system, but heavy rain potential, maybe some gustier winds, especially along the coastline. A possibility with the northern half of this system being the most dominant. It's not necessarily going to be the south and east side or the northeast side that's going to be most dominant. It's going to be more of the north and the northwest side of the system may actually have the heaviest rain potential and some of the strongest winds. But we'll have to see how that structure evolves, especially within the 12 hours, 18 hours leading up to landfall. But with that setup, it's possible some of these impacts could work their way into far south Georgia and the Georgia Coastal Empire. Again, here's the setup for you, just told a different way. Cold front moves south, cooler, drier air, sunnier conditions filtering into North Georgia initially. Now, we're close enough to the system to where some clouds are going to get thrown back our way here in Atlanta. But really, the system is going to be guided into Florida well south of Atlanta, as at the same time, the coolest weather in months starts to filter into the Mid-South, Appalachia, Appalachia and the Ohio River Valley, Mississippi River Valley, and then into portions of the southeast. Of course, we could see some rain impacts, some heavy rain impacts, and some gustier winds work their way into coastal Georgia, far south Georgia, coastal South Carolina, coastal North Carolina, but it's kind of a fine line. You're going to be battling the much drier air moving in from the north and west, and exactly how sharp of a turn out to sea this system takes as we get into our kind of Wednesday night into Thursday time period as it kind of reemerges in the southwestern Atlantic after making landfall earlier in the day Wednesday along Florida's west coast. Again, still don't have that new forecast track in. It is set to arrive at 5 p.m. Looks like it's not going to come in as early as yesterday's did. I think if any changes do occur, they're probably going to bump up that intensity as we get into, the Monday, Tuesday time frame. I think that portion of the lifespan of Milton could feature maybe a Category 4 hurricane. We'll have to see. Certainly could be a little bit stronger in that period, but still going to encounter less favorable conditions for strengthening. Maybe, with any luck, some weakening as it approaches landfall, but by that point, it's still going to be moving a lot of water. Storm surge risk is very high along Florida's west coast. Many of these same areas were so heavily impacted by Helene, still recovering, very much still damage there with these beachfront homes, these barrier islands, these beach communities, and once again we'll be under the gun. That storm surge risk, even if we do see winds come down as it approaches landfall, will be significant. And in addition to that, we do have an inland flooding risk, especially along and north of that forecast track, risk of tornadoes as well, and there still could be some destructive winds, even if they are a little weaker at landfall versus earlier in its lifespan over the Gulf of Mexico. I want to thank everyone for tuning in on this ANF Plus stream. We're going to be back, Carly Barnett and I, on Atlanta News First Plus at 8 p.m. Update also available in the First Alert Weather app. We'll have another one this evening, both with our forecast and the latest on Milton. And you can grab the latest this evening, Atlanta News First on Peachtree TV, Atlanta CW affiliate, starting at 10. And then back for the late news, hopefully going on time tonight, but we will let you know if we do have that late start time on WANF Atlanta News First, starting, hopefully, with any luck, at 11 p.m. Going to leave you with a gorgeous view of Lake Lanier. It is a stunning one outside, one of the last really warm afternoons for at least 7 to 10 days. If you like the warmth, get outside and enjoy it. If you hate it and you're ready for the cooler fall air, it is on the way. Again, on the go this evening. You can still get that latest First Alert forecast in the First Alert Weather app.